The Gate is a horror film that was released in 1987 by Vestron Pictures. It stars Stephen Dorff, a very young Stephen Dorff, and it was directed by Tibor Takacs. Not quite sure on that one. It's released on Blu-ray, very special edition Blu-ray by Vestron, along with two other releases on the 26th of February. Dorff plays Glenn, a young man who, along with his friend, stumble across something in a hole that's been dug up in the back of their garden. And it basically leads to gremlin-like creatures coming out of it, and yeah, pretty much doing that kind of 80s Little Monsters style horror kind of thing. Now, I first heard about this film from Will I Like It Reviews, CP, over at Will I Like It Reviews. I did a thing for him called Little Monsters. It was like a little documentary all about this kind of subgenre of horror movie that came out of the 80s, that was kind of born out of primarily Gremlins and then films like that. And I'd never seen this, never even heard of it until he mentioned it to me. So it's always been one that's been on my radar since. Anyway, opportunities come up to see it, and what's it like? Well, I know that CP has recently done an about turn on it. He liked this movie quite a lot as a child, and now it's one of those that the effects kind of worn off. I'm watching it for the first time, and I gotta say, I'm more inclined to agree with the child CP than the adult CP, because I thought this was a blast. Now I don't know if it's just because it's been cleaned up for Blu-ray or what, but the transfer for this is fantastic, and there's some really inventive stuff in this. It's just got that kind of typical 80s feel that you get when you have a bunch of friends kind of stumbling into some kind of horrific type of mystery. You know, you think of other 80s hits like It and Gremlins, obviously. But I liked it. It has that vibe. It's got the 80s vibe. It's all confined essentially to one location. There are a couple of times we move away from this house, but it's mostly all confined to this house. You can tell it's a very low budget. It doesn't have anywhere near the budget that they had on Gremlins. But I think that what they have, they use really well. Like I said, confining it to this house, spending all their money mostly on these kind of practical effects, these little goblin suits and whatnot. And it's just, there's some stop motion work in there that's actually pretty good, and the way it interacts with the live action stuff, again from an effects standpoint, is pretty cutting edge with regards to their budget. But I had a lot of fun with this. It's not perfect, you know, it's not like top tier 80s stuff, but I can see why it has a cult following. Some of the effects by today's standards obviously look quite dated. You know, there's some green screen work that doesn't quite kind of work now, but then there's other stuff where you're looking at it and you think, how did they pull that off? As with a lot of these 80s kind of horror films that kind of revolve around youngsters, there's not a lot of attention paid to logic at times. You know, we just need to get to the good stuff, which is the horror element, which is the little monsters, which is, you know, the shenanigans in the house, and how we get there. It's a bit strained at times, you know. There's this kid, the friend to Stephen Dorff's character. He finds out what's going on essentially through the lyrics of a song on an album he's listening to. He's listening to a heavy metal album, and then he starts reading the sleeve notes, and it's all clued in to what's going on. It's a bit left field. It's a bit like, okay, but you know, anything to get the story moving, I guess. And I think in the 80s as well, you know, there was a lot of talk about backtracking and things like that. You know, there was a bit of a scare for parents with the kids listening to heavy metal music, and they've obviously had a bit of fun with that. They've injected that into the screenplay and just messed with it a bit. By today's standards, obviously, I think any kids growing up today watching this would be like, what's that all about? Because they didn't live through that kind of scaremongering. I've seen this kind of stuff before in films, but you know, very loose kind of threads to get us from A to B, but once we're actually at B, it's a real fun time. Now, it must be said, this Blu-ray release is jam-packed packed with extras, most of which I've not even got through yet at the time of doing this review. I have looked quite a few of them. The director's commentary is pretty interesting. There's an interview between the director and the special effects supervisor. That's very interesting as well, hearing their stories. And besides that, you've got making ofs, theatrical trailers and whatnot. Like I say, if you're a fan of this film, then I would definitely highly recommend getting this package because it is jam-packed with stuff. I think The Gate sits comfortably alongside films such as Gremlins and Critters. Critters for me is still the standout from this kind of subgenre. But yeah, if you've not seen this, definitely check it out. I give it a 3.5 out of 5. If you have seen The Gate, I would like to know what you thought about it. So please do comment below and leave me your thoughts. Until next time, crack in.